let's jump right into this explainer and dig into Merlin Stone's fascinating archaeological investigation. We are looking at a truly monumental historical question today. How exactly did human societies transition from worshiping a supreme female deity to a male one? Stone's research dives deep into ancient history to uncover the mechanics of this massive shift, and it is a wild ride. To wrap our heads around this profound transformation, we've got 5 main stops on our journey. We'll start with the ancient divine ancestress, move into life in matrilineal societies, look at the Indo-European invasions, see how they went about rewriting the ancient myths, and finally unpack the politics of paradise.
All right, Section 1, the ancient divine ancestress, uncovering the earliest human records of worship. Let's see just how far back the roots of human theology actually go.
To put this into perspective, we have to look thousands of years before classical antiquity. We're talking Paleolithic goddess figurines dating all the way back to 25,000 BC across Eurasia. By 7,000 BC, we start seeing actual physical shrines built in places like Jericho. Fast forward to 3000 BC, and the very first written records in Sumer are already revering this goddess. So this female-centered theology existed for millennia before the Judeo-Christian timeline even really began. For context, Abraham, the first prophet of the male deity Yahweh, doesn't arrive in Canaan until much later, around 1800 BC. So, who was she? Well, Stone's research makes it abundantly clear that the divine ancestress wasn't just some minor fertility idol. She was the supreme creator deity of these periods. She was absolutely the whole shebang, revered as the provider of life, the giver of laws, and the ultimate shaper of human destinies. It completely upends that modern assumption we have that ancient people just inherently viewed the prime creator as male. Moving to Section 2, Life in Matrilineal Societies. How theology shaped social structures. Let's explore how these religious beliefs actually played out in everyday life. Because, theology doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It dictates how a society operates. Stone points out a crucial link here. Goddess worship was inherently tied to matrilineal societies. In a matrilineal structure, descent, kinship, and property are all passed through the female line. This gave women massive economic power and social autonomy. Contrast that with the patrilineal norm that came later, where everything is passed through the male line and men hold the economic power. Stone's argument is that when your supreme deity is female, it naturally aligns with a society where women hold vast structural power. It just makes structural sense. If that sounds a bit hard to believe, get a load of this historical account from Diodorus of Sicily in 49 BC. He was reporting on Egyptian customs, and he literally wrote that it was ordained the queen should have greater power and honor than the king. He even noted that husbands agreed in marriage contracts that they would be obedient in all things to their wives. No way, right? But it acts as a concrete artifact proving that female dominance and autonomy were once actually codified in ancient law. Plus, these early societies credited the goddess as the literal patron of civilization itself. We're talking deities like Ninlil, inventing agriculture, Saraswati creating the original alphabet, and Isis championing law and justice. They were revered as prophetic healers and, yes, courageous warriors. It's totally contrary to that later stereotype of women as just passive helpers. In these ancient cultures, women were viewed as the intellectual and material innovators of their entire world. Which brings us to Section 3, the Indo-European invasions, the violent shift in theology and power. Because this ancient system didn't just quietly fade away on its own. Right around 2400 BC, Indo-European invaders from the north swept into the Middle East, and they brought a completely different, aggressive worldview. They worshipped supreme male sky and storm gods, they brought patrilineal descent aimed at territorial conquest, and this is key. To ensure their newly conquered property actually passed down to their biological sons, they instituted incredibly strict control over female sexuality to absolutely guarantee paternity. So, here's the million-dollar question. You have a society that has worshipped a female creator for literally thousands of years. How do the conquerors actually manage to suppress that and cement their new patriarchal order permanently? That takes us to Section 4, Rewriting the Ancient Myths, Assimilation and Theological Propaganda. Physical conquest simply wasn't enough. They had to rewrite history. Stone argues that these conquerors systematically co-opted local religions by rewriting the myths from the ground up. Supreme creator goddesses were suddenly rewritten as monsters, murdered by male gods, who then, conveniently, claim credit for creating the world from her body. The serpent goddess of divine prophecy, she gets recast as an evil monster to be slain by heroes like Zeus. And where the goddess originally took youthful male consorts, the new stories featured her being forcefully subdued. They essentially turned female creators into defeated figures as a way to legitimize male supremacy. Actually, let's pause on one specific, incredibly important symbol here, the serpent. Stone points out that understanding what the serpent originally meant is the ultimate key to our next section. Before it was vilified, the serpent was widely revered as the sacred instrument of divine revelation and wisdom. It was the trusted oracle of the goddess.
And that sets us up perfectly for Section 5, the politics of paradise. Time to deconstruct the Adam and Eve myth. Let's re-examine a story almost everyone knows, but maybe not through this specific historical lens.
Stone's analysis takes the Genesis story of Adam and Eve and frames it not as some innocent fable about the dawn of time, but as calculated political propaganda. She argues it was essentially a contrived political tool produced by Levite priests. Their goal? To enforce patrilineal rule and completely wipe out the stubborn remnants of the old goddess religion that the people were still clinging to. It's kind of mind-blowing when you plug the ancient symbols back into the story, because the entire meaning flips. Decoding Eden's symbols reveals that the serpent is the ancient goddess of prophecy. The tree is her sacred symbol of reproduction. So in this context, when Eve eats the fruit, she isn't committing a foolish sin. She is actively defying the new male god to participate in the sacred rites of the old goddess religion. Which leads straight to the climax of the myth in Genesis 3:16. I will greatly multiply your pain in childbearing. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Stone argues this specific punishment wasn't just divine providence. It was a highly calculated decree written right into the foundational myth to permanently strip women of their historical, economic, and sexual independence. It locked them firmly into the new patrilineal system. And the cultural fallout from this rewritten myth was absolute. According to the source, it effectively established male domination as a divine right. It instituted strict control over female sexuality for the sake of property inheritance. It stripped women of their independence and culturally framed them as inherently guilty and submissive. The legacy of this one story deeply permeated secular law and culture for centuries, setting up gender dynamics we are literally still grappling with today. So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. If our contemporary understanding of gender roles, who holds power, who's a natural leader, how our society is structured, if all of that was built on intentionally rewritten myths serving a very specific political agenda, what changes when we finally uncover the original story? It really makes you wonder how much of our present is still just echoing the political maneuvers of the distant past. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the stories we're told.